Hello, everybody. Welcome to BoilerBall postgame in the lounge. I'm Sam Sprunger. Finally, Grant's here for everybody. The All-American Grant Flora and Dustin Schutte from Purdue on SI. Gentlemen, that was what we kind of expected today. A 93-63 win over the Maryland Terrapins in College Park.
Yeah, no, I was I was waiting just a second.
We're speechless.
Yeah. Yeah, there is kind of a lot to say about it. You know, it really wasn't just one thing, but I mean, yeah, Purdue looked just so much better. You can tell, like, you know, I feel like losing because it was a Tuesday game and you had 4 or 5 days to kind of sit on it and you know, kind of stew and everything. Like that really showed, and they came out. I was a little concerned just with it being on the road, especially a little further, like Maryland, like, you know, what was going to happen. But they looked great, and that Maryland crowd was never really getting into it outside of the first few minutes. So phenomenal game.
Well, in 4 of the last 5, Dustin, Purdue's had to play on the road. 2 of them on the West Coast, then they come home, play a game, and then they go to IU, and then they go to College Park. That's not an easy trip to do. It's not an easy stretch to pull, even if you're expected to beat that team in College Park.
Right. I mean, this was a tough stretch, and it doesn't get much easier. I mean, Oregon comes to town next week, and Purdue, that should be another opponent Purdue handles pretty easily. They've dealt with some injury issues. They're not very good this year. But then you turn around and then you go to Iowa, which gave Purdue problems in Mackey, and then you play, obviously, a top 5 Nebraska team on the road. So 6 of 8 on the road. This is a game that I think you had to have, and this was the proverbial get-right game where you win by a large margin and everything just kind of goes right. And, I thought leading into this game, one of the things I noticed was on today's Sunday, so I think it was either Friday or Saturday, they posted pictures from Purdue's practice, and there were a lot of smiles around the court. And I think for a team that was in the middle of a 3-game losing streak and maybe was starting to feel the pressure of, Big Ten championship, Final Four. I think at some point, if you're Matt Painter, as frustrated as he was after that IU game, you also just have to get back to having fun. Mm-hmm. And so it looked like today, it's easy when to have fun when shots are falling, you're playing good defense and you win by 30. But I thought that was probably a more, kind of get out of your head, get back to just playing basketball and have fun, because we've only got, what's now 9 games left in the regular season before things really start to amp up.
Yeah, and you mentioned on the platform formerly known as Twitter that, this was a game Purdue needed, and I responded to it. I don't know that Nebraska and Iowa wanted to see this kind of performance from Purdue, even though it's against a team that they should win, but beat. You just mentioned that it was a get well game, but at the same time, shots were falling. Things were happening from what we expected to see from Purdue all the time, and they'd hit that kind of dead spot to where they'd lost 3 in a row. They'd performed quite poorly at times, and then word is that Braden Smith held a players only meeting, and I think that probably went a long ways too, to saying, look, we need to get over what we just went through. We still have plenty of, let's say, and I'm not saying it, I always say, 36-4 is great, but let's say Purdue goes to Iowa, wins, goes to Nebraska, wins, they beat Michigan, they beat Michigan State. All of a sudden, we're not talking about this 3-game losing streak that they just went through.
No, yeah, I mean, that's the, No, I think my computer is lagging a little bit.
It's fine.
I think my computer is lagging a little bit.
I'm used to it.
I might be overlapping with some of you guys. But, I was just going to, you're exactly right. If they go in and they get some of even if they don't win the Big Ten, you're going to look back and say, yeah, that's a 3-game losing streak that they shouldn't have had. But I think even to the, Indiana is the only time that I felt really concerned in terms of this team isn't putting forth the effort. Like the UCLA game, I thought that the effort was there. I thought that, at the end of the game, UCLA executed and Purdue didn't. At the Illinois game, they got crushed on the glass and still had opportunities to win. Mm-hmm. So this was the first time where I think Tuesday night was the first time where you thought, oh boy, Purdue might be in some trouble here. And you mentioned, Sam, shots falling. One of the craziest things to me, and I'll kind of end on this and then actually let Grant talk. One of the things that was kind of crazy to me was people were talking on Tuesday, like, why don't we let's get Trey Kaufman-Renn back at the 5. He's much more efficient at the 5, and let's, this and that. And Fletcher's not playing well. Purdue's offense has been really good all season. They're
still the second most efficient.
The offense is not the problem. It was a problem against Indiana, but again, if you just cover the 3-point line and don't leave Connor Enright open, and like you win that game even scoring only 67 points. So, like, to me, the offense has never been an issue, but it's funny to me how quickly we can tend to turn things just because Fletcher wasn't shooting well and Trey, even though he's averaging like 12 and a half, 13 points per game this season, he goes off for 23 and instantly everybody wants to go back to last season when this team couldn't rebound and couldn't get a defensive stop.
Yeah, I'm thinking back to last year too, when Purdue had the 4-game losing streak, and the last game of that losing streak was the road game in Assembly Hall. And then they came back out of it and kind of flipped the script for the rest of the season. They still, had 1 or 2 more losses before the Big Ten season was over. But, we all know they had a pretty good NCAA tournament run for where they were at. So, yeah, it's like I definitely was not surprised in the performance today, but having a players only meeting, having some days of practice where they just found the joy again. Like, that was one thing on the court today. Like, everybody just looked like they were playing like it wasn't necessarily a locked in like killer type of I don't know, vibe. Like, they weren't just serious about it the whole time, but they were intense, and they with also finding the joy and the flow of the game. And that was really good. And just seeing like Fletcher knock down those early shots and keep it going the rest of the afternoon was huge. So I know it's against Maryland, and Maryland has struggled. So you would expect Purdue to get a nice win here with a good margin, but still just seeing them get back to that is good. And now we'll, as time goes on, we'll see Purdue go up against tougher competition and see if they can keep it going. But just kind of like you were talking about, just that joy and the flow again that they used to have.
Well, and that was the thing that I kept looking at is they're getting back to what got them to 17-1. They were maybe not the two-man game that I'd said, with Braden and TKR really starting to get the offense going, but the rest of the stuff, Fletcher getting right, hitting some shots, getting the feel. And real quick to go back to everybody, the comments I saw, you need to sit Fletcher down and give Liam Murphy some minutes and so he can start hitting shots. Well, looking at the totals, Murphy didn't have the greatest shooting day. He was 0 for 2 from 3. So it's not like, and don't get me wrong, I understand he's not gotten very many minutes. It's hard to get into a flow. But you're talking about putting a guy that hasn't had very many minutes all year into the starting lineup to shoot like we expect Fletcher to shoot. And that's not going to happen just like Fletcher hit. But we've talked about, and they played better defense. They had a lot better rim protection or rim defense at the rim, out rebounding Purdue or Maryland on the 37-26. They had 26 defensive rebounds. So they were at the hoop making sure to clean up and give them Maryland one and dones most of the time.
Yeah, I think I think they ended the first half with 1 offensive rebound, and then I think they came out to start the second half, and on that, it was either their first or second possession of the second half, they had 2 offensive rebounds.
It was the first.
Purdue,
yep.
Yeah, pretty much eliminated any offensive rebounds. They crashed the glass. I was thoroughly impressed with TKR because that was how he was rebounding earlier in this season. It was just get out of my way. I'm getting the basketball. I don't care if you're wearing a black jersey, a white jersey, gold jersey. I don't care what you're wearing. I'm getting the basketball.
Running you over.
Yeah. And that was the kind of tenacity they need him to play with. The other thing too, I'm going to mention this because obviously Fletcher's going for 29 points. I would have liked to see him get two more just to get a career high and really start to quiet some people. But as well as he was, or as well as he, that's true. As well as he performed from a shooting perspective, I thought he drew 2 offensive fouls early in the game, and he had some really good defensive possessions. And I understand, again, as we've talked about, this isn't the greatest Maryland team. They're not hard to necessarily guard, but I do think that gives you a level of momentum and a level of confidence that maybe he had been lacking. So for him to be successful on both ends of the floor, going 7 of 10 for 3, 9 of 14 from the floor, drawing 2 offensive fouls, I think he had 2 rebounds in the game, which is, I mean, that's a good day for Fletch, right? Like, he's not a big time rebounder, but I just thought he played really well all around, and it was good to see that for him because, we've seen him struggle at times, but when he's able to light it up. And the other thing too that I'll say about him is a lot of people, again, wanted him benched or not to be in the starting rotation or whatever. We've seen over the last 3 years, the freshman year was the only time he really didn't break out of the slump by the time the season had reached its end. He's broken out of it every year since then. I mean, in that Houston game in last year, he had 15 points in the first half. Like, he was the reason they were in the game in the first half. The reason why you don't sit him on the bench or swap him out is because you never know when he's going to break out of it. Yep. And today was a perfect example. Like, after the IU game, a lot of people said, as you mentioned, start Jack Benner, start Liam Murphy, bring somebody else in, start Omer Meyer, whoever and what's he do? He comes out and scores 29 points, and he and Braden account for 48 of the team's points today. So just I thought he was locked in and ready to go on both ends really from the jump, and that's a good sign for Purdue.
Well, and you talked about the 7 of 10 like that. I mentioned on something to you or on that post that you said something about, Purdue having a get right game. And I don't know that Iowa and Nebraska wanted to see these guys doing this, especially when it seems like maybe this was the game that Fletcher finally starts finding its level, which means he's going to go on a tear. And you mentioned it too. We even posted a graphic a couple maybe last week or the week before that every year he's had a slump, and he's always come back with the next 10 to 15 games where he's shooting 40, 45, 50 even % from threes. And if that's the case, there are some teams that are in trouble because now all of a sudden he's even more of a threat. Not that Purdue fans already know that he's kind of a threat anyways. He's the threat that we've seen him throughout his career. But teams going, oh, he's struggled so badly lately. Well, watch out, because he will find his level, and that's what it seems like he's doing now.
Yeah, and I think those, the other stats you talked about, they're all kind of indicative of his response. And, sure, was this response maybe a little bit overdue? Maybe. But, you've just the things, too, the broadcaster mentioned how he was kind of coaching Daniel Jacobson on the court there, the one possession where Jacobson had the foul where he wasn't vertical and things like that. This guy is a coach's kid. He's a coach on the court. He knows how to respond and how to handle these things. And it really showed in that way. And I'm not saying he did it perfectly. The Indiana game, I think there were some composure issues at times and at some other points throughout this stretch. But being able to come in when really that criticism was at its peak and to kind of do it the right way. Because some guys would try and do too much and maybe take too tough a shots or try and be outside of themselves. But he just did what he's best at and did it to the best of his ability. And it was huge in this afternoon's game.
Dustin, I didn't know if you had a response. I'm just letting you go.
No,
okay.
I do have a tendency to chime in whenever I want, but no, I think
that's why I was pausing for a second.
No, I think he hit it. I think he hit the nail on the coffin and or hit the nail on the head, hit the nail on the coffin. Boys, it has been a long week apparently. That's snow and traveling throughout Indiana. Oh my gosh. Okay. Continue, Sam. I'm just going to go off rails here.
Well, I did want to you made a comment about how, it wasn't the starts that had been the concern during this streak. It was the second 10 minutes of the half, each of the first halves in those games that had been a concern. and kind of where you saw Purdue kind of give back the lead they developed, or given up completely the lead and then fallen behind, with IU, the IU game being the example of that one. Maryland got it within 10, and I don't have the play-by-play pulled up, but they got it within 10. After it had been 16, I think, they got it back within 10, and you think, oh. And then Purdue responded like that and got it back out to 16, 17 points. Now, again, we've got to always preface this post-game for this is against Maryland, who's not a good basketball team. But for them to respond like that on the road in an environment that could get kind of hectic, and Maryland's not, they've got some athletes, they've got some players. Saunders went 0 today. Like, he didn't score any points. Now, granted, he got into foul trouble early and was on the bench for a good portion of the day, but like, they have some athletes that could put some points on the board, and Purdue just kind of stopped it there and just went on their own run.
Yeah, I mean, that was my biggest concern was just the fact that my computer's freezing, so I'm just completely guessing when you're done talking.
It's fine.
But like, that was my biggest concern was like, okay, Purdue's got up to a lead. They had a 12-point lead against UCLA. They had an 11-point and then a 10-point lead in the first half against Illinois. And then they had a 4-point lead against Indiana, and IU goes on a 21-5 run to end the half. And as you mentioned, it got down to 10, and it's like, okay, well, what's going to happen here? These next 2 or 3 minutes, and I think Fletcher and then maybe Braden hit back-to-back threes, as you mentioned, to get it back up to 16. And then from that point, it was really game over. Like, I don't think Maryland even threatened. They couldn't sustain any momentum. Purdue got stops. They got the rebounds. They hit shots when they needed to. Everything that what we were concerned about, because I think sometimes there's a tendency to like look at a 30-point win and say, oh, well, Purdue's fixed. But you might see issues like, oh, Maryland just missed 10 open shots from 3, and if they make half of them, maybe it's a slightly different game. Or you say, well, the rebounding wasn't quite where it needed to be, or, this or that. I thought all the way around, there were no concerns that you walk away from this game and say, Purdue, Maryland is not a great offensive team, so they're a little bit easier to defend. So I still think it's a little bit of wait and see on the defense, but you're not like, it wasn't like one of those like, well, Maryland just missed 12 wide open threes. Right. And against another team, I thought that for the most part, Purdue defended the 3-point line and were in their rotations and were communicating a lot better.
And Grant, in that first half, Maryland missed 13 shots. They were 4 of 8 from threes, which is not bad at all, but they were only 4 of 8. But they missed 13 shots, and Purdue had 12 defensive rebounds. That's what I think really helped blow that lead wide open.
Yeah, and we talked about Trakoff and Renz rebounding earlier. He had 10 of them. Daniel Jacobson had 5, and I think like there were just some of the times where he was just tapping them out, and they were able to grab a hold of those long rebounds. And yeah, I think even some other guys did that too. I saw a lot of tap outs, and I generally am not like a huge fan of it. Like, I'm like, if you can tap it out, why don't you just go grab it? But sometimes, that's not really the case. Like, you just got to try and get a hand on it. And I think Purdue has been burned on some of those tap outs in these last couple of games. And this time they kind of flipped the script and did it themselves. And Jacobson obviously has a huge advantage with his length. Now, Maryland, of course, being undersized, like Jacobson's going to have a better opportunity to do that. But still, I thought it was a lot of good effort from him. And even from Clough, I saw him scrapping too. So I just thought the bigs kind of took that challenge, being more physical and rebounding really well, and it helped Purdue a lot. I thought Maryland missed a lot of like pretty good looks at the rim, especially in the second half. There were a lot where it was like, oh, they really should have put him in, but it also like they got more opportunities on like the second chance tap ups and stuff, which added to those offensive rebounding stats in the second half. Some of them I didn't think necessarily was an issue with Purdue's defensive rebounding, as opposed to just kind of the nature of the positions of where Maryland was at and where they were shooting from.
Yeah, because if you look at the second half, Dustin, and granted, a bunch of Purdue's bench got a lot of late minutes, so it wasn't like it was already a 30-point game. But Maryland out-rebounded Purdue 19-17. They had 7 offensive rebounds in that second half. But like I said, a lot of that was, kind of mop-up time at the end where Purdue might have been undersized, couldn't get rebounds and stuff like that. But what are your overall takes from this, how they responded in the second half? They didn't take their foot off the pedal and just kind of cruise.
Yeah, no, I think that's important because again, this is a team that has relinquished leads. And what was their halftime lead? 21 points.
21. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there was never going to be a moment unless Maryland just unleashed, somehow found the best performance they'd have. So there was never going to be a moment when I thought that Purdue was going to be in trouble. But if Maryland comes out of the half and goes on, a 10-2 run and kind of slices into that lead, then I think there's some cause for concern. But they really didn't. There was some good possessions that Maryland, and even Bruce Pearl said this, Maryland got better looks in the second half, and Purdue still extended the lead. Like, I think by that first media timeout, they were up 23 or 24 points. So even though Maryland's offense was looking a little bit better and getting better shots and a little bit more patient, Purdue was still able to increase its lead by 2 or 3 points in that first 4-minute stretch. And I think that that's important because they always talk about that middle 8. And it's something that I think is over talked about and maybe a little bit cliche, but the middle 8, I think Purdue did a really good job ending the first half, especially considering how they've struggled in recent weeks. And then opening up the second half, which it's kind of been hit or miss. Like we saw that Minnesota game several weeks ago, Sam, where they just came out, and I think it was a 21 or 22-0 run out of the break. They just came out with their hair on fire. And we've seen other times when, they look a little sluggish coming out of the locker room. So just an overall really good performance. And then the other thing we talked about Trey Koppman-Wren getting 10 rebounds. And Grant, I'm glad you brought up the Daniel Jacobson tip outs because I thought he played some really good minutes, and I included that in some of the things that I noticed from the game in my story on the website. But everybody who played significant minutes today had multiple rebounds. Koppman-Wren had 10. CJ Cox 4, Oscar Clough only 3. But again, TKR stole a lot of those. Braden Smith and Fletcher both 2, Liam Murphy 2, Jacobson 5, Meyer 3, Benter 3. Like that's what Purdue needs to have consistently. And it's not that you have to out rebound everybody by 15 every single game. It would be nice, but if you get that kind of contribution from everybody on your roster, it makes life a lot easier. And ending those possessions and getting out in either transition or at least getting your offense and getting into your sets.
Yeah, I noticed I made an observation about Jakari Harris. Purdue was up by a good bit, and he got a wide open 3 look. And instead, he pump faked and decided, you know what, I'm going to the hoop. There was nobody there. And he drove to the hoop, drew the foul, didn't make the bucket, but he went and sunk his free throws. And in a game where you're having this much fun being that far ahead, it would have been really easy for him to just jack up the 3. And then if he misses it, oh well. But he made a drive and an athletic move that you can kind of say, okay, he's seen it now. Let's see what he does when he gets into a game that matters a little bit more or against a little bit tougher of competition that, okay, do I jack up that 3? Nope, I can make that play to the hoop. Now, granted, he's probably not going to have a wide open avenue like he had, but he's still got the capability of making that athletic move. I think they did a lot more than just, more time than, or did a lot of things than just win by 30. They worked on some things to like you said, get well. This was a get well game.
And I thought I was going to say something about Jakari too. Like he missed his first few shots, and I was thinking, oh man, like I would really like to see him get going. And then he kind of got going and made 2 threes there, got another basket and made his free throws. But like he's one of those guys that you've got to see him be able to take advantage of the open shots and the open looks because he's probably your 4th or 5th option pretty much every time he's on the court, which means he gets the least amount of focus defensively. Right. And he's been one of those guys these last few games in the losing streak that I think, it would have been nice to see him bring more off the bench. And so I thought he had a good game. And again, it was just like nice to see those things happen later in the game to where he kind of like worked through some of that funk and that dry spell, if you will.
Yeah, Jakari. I thought Jakari played well. Like scrolling through the post, he was at the bottom for some reason, and it's like, oh yeah, he had 12 points today.
Right.
He did a lot of good things, and I think Jakari has been really good defensively. I think the IU game aside, I don't know that he played particularly well, but I think he's done some good things on the defensive end. As Grant said, if you're able to get him to knock down his open shots, and if you can get him to score between 6 and 10 points per game, that's an added bonus for Purdue. So it was really good. He's also just like, and I have a little bit of a bias here, having sat and talked with him a few times now. He's just a really good kid. So it's hard not to root for him to be successful when he's on the court. So yeah, I think him being able to knock down some shots, and I think even to Grant's point, you said this about Jakari, his ability to pump fake and then drive and get the better shot. I think Fletcher even did that a few times. There was a time, at least once I remember, where he pump faked, looked like he had a pretty good look at it, but pump faked, stepped to the right, took a dribble, and then knocked down an even a more wide open look. And that just speaks to like, I want to take the right shot. I'm not trying to heat check out here. I'm trying to get into a rhythm, get my confidence back. And so I think that he did a really nice job of that too, as Grant mentioned earlier, kind of playing within himself and continuing to make the right play instead of just a play.
Yeah. And again, it's one of those of instead of being up by so much and just throwing it up there and hoping, and thinking, I'm going to get hot. He's still working on things, and he was already hot. He just made sure, and I'm talking about Fletcher, by the way. Sorry, just the fact that he knew that he was on a heater in this game, but yet he was still within his own game to make sure that he wasn't just throwing shots up for the sake of shooting shots.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in. Yeah, I think I think that's kind of what it is for Purdue overall too, right? When you have so many weapons and you're the most offensive or one of the most efficient offensive teams in the country,
still number 2,
right? Like you have to take like the right plays and the right shots, because if you don't, like those are just wastes, because you have so many guys that can convert on the right plays that when, like I said, like you can't afford those possessions where you try and do something that's not within yourself, because you're just wasting so many great opportunities. Kind of like when Purdue had Zach Edey and they would like turn the ball over a million times, and you're like, you guys have got to get shots up because Edey will rebound most of them. It's almost a similar situation where it's like, just make the right play, even if it's like, to a guy that's wide open for three, even though we know Braden can do some of the crazy stuff he does, Fletch the same thing. Like, the right play is the more efficient play. And when you have so many guys that can make those plays, you don't want to take those possessions where you don't give that chance.
Dustin,
yeah.
Go ahead.
I mean, yeah, we see this team is efficient for a reason. They've got high IQ basketball players. They make the smart play. Again, it's bizarre to me still, the argument. I understand people were frustrated with the loss against IU, but people wanting to kind of shift this lineup and then go back to TKR at the 5, which he's been very efficient at. And maybe in certain situations you can do that. Maybe you can play small ball and go to the pick and roll and get him the ball more often. That's not going to be an every game thing, though. They don't have to do that. This team can score. It's strictly on the defense and the rebounding. When they don't rebound well, they don't put themselves in good position to win games. When they're getting lost in rotations and they're living in help and they are constantly losing their man, that's when this team has trouble. There's really no, like, what has there been? I don't even think the Indiana game, they were incredibly inefficient offensively. Outside of, like, the Iowa State game is the only one when you're like, the offense just did not play well, like could not hit a shot, and Iowa State hit everything. And sometimes that just happens in basketball. But even if you want to throw the IU game in there, what's that, 2 games this season? Mm-hmm. So, like, again, this is a team that knows what it's doing offensively. It comes down to, can you get the rebounds? Can you protect the basketball? And can you play good enough defense when those shots aren't falling? They don't need to change anything what they're doing offensively. Can they mix in TKR in the short roll maybe a little bit more frequently or in certain situations? Absolutely. I think that they probably will, seeing what he was able to do against Indiana. But by and large, this team is going to win games with his offense, and it just needs to be good enough on the glass. And needs to be really good on the glass, but needs to be really good on the glass and just good enough defensively.
Well, and that's what what I was going to say is, excuse me, if you make that move offensively to put TKR at the 5, you are now defensively deficient, very defensively deficient compared to what you are when you've got a Clough or a Jacobson in the lineup playing in at the 5. And it's that's the kicker is, yeah, we probably could be a little bit more efficient offensively when it comes to putting TKR at the 5 and moving other people around, but you're going to be much more deficient at the defensive end. And I don't think that's a trade that you want to make against a team that has more length, that where a Clough or a Jacobson would be more beneficial.
Not when you're a great offensive team either way. Like,
right.
You know what I mean?
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. And I think if you were to make that lineup switch, it maybe is good for Trakoff and Wren's individual offense, but like outside of that, I don't even know. When you have Clough and Jacobson in there, they present more offensive options as well, and obviously the defensive stuff. So I think a lot of people saw Trakoff and Wren's struggles and then his alternate successes when they went to that lineup, and were like, oh, this is what they should do. But like, you got to take into account all the factors, all the different personnel, and the net outcome of it. And so I think you guys are right, and just there's just not a good trade-off there.
Well, and I think the other factor in that is people are going to look at Oscar Clough's numbers these last, 5 or 6 games. He against USC, he had 19 and 6, but since then, 6 points, 9 points, 2 points, 6 points. In his rebounds, he hasn't had more than 6 rebounds in a game. But the caveat there is he's still boxing out the biggest guy on the floor. He's still taking him out of the equation. So TKR can crash the boards relentlessly, or some of the guards can swoop in and steal some of those rebounds. So you would like to see Clough's numbers be higher, especially on the glass. I totally understand that. And I get why. Agree. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. But at the same time, you've got to account for like, okay, well, even though he may not be getting the rebound, he's making life easier for everybody else to get rebounds. Mm-hmm. So, and there's going to be some outliers there. The Indiana game was unacceptable. They should, as Matt Painter said, they should have won that rebounding battle by 12-15, and they didn't. And so I just think that, Clough is another one who, much like Fletcher, sometimes what he brings to the floor doesn't always show up in the stat column. And even when he's struggling, he's a net positive for Purdue.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say there is even though he's not, like you mentioned, a couple of different ways, even though he's not rebounding it, there's a good chance that Purdue is rebounding it, even though he's not the one actually pulling down the board. And, this game showed a lot of, okay, this is what we've seen all year long with Purdue, and this is what we should expect from Purdue the rest of the way. Now, we're not going to get the domination that we're not winning each game by 30 points. It's just not going to happen, obviously. But there should be some more competitiveness in this, and it looks like at least that maybe, and I guess after the 6-day layoff and going against Oregon, a team yet, like you mentioned, Dustin, that they should beat, if they come back and perform exactly the same way and they get a 20-25 point win, then I would be more apt to say, okay, I think they've gotten through those doldrums that they just came through or went on, and they're not going to go undefeated in this next stretch, I don't think. But I think they're going to be a heck of a lot more competitive and maybe even have a more of a winning record than I think they could have.
Yeah, I think that this is the biggest test coming up right here, right? Like, you've got Iowa and Nebraska on the road, and then you're going to have later in the season, you got Michigan and Michigan State, and you get those both at home. If you win 3 of 4, you feel pretty darn good about that, because those are 4 really good basketball teams. Yep. I would say even 2-2, you're not hitting the panic button, but I think you want to make sure that you're really competitive in those games, much like the Illinois. There's going to be stuff to fix, but much like the Illinois game or the UCLA game, after those games, it's disappointing when you lose, but I wasn't panicked about the way. So it's just like, you're not going to go through the Big Ten undefeated. And I remember before the season started, during that 5-game stretch, I said, if they go 4-1, don't panic. If they go 3-2, don't panic, because those are going to be some good teams in there. And so it is concerning when you lose 3 in a row. But I always point back to 09-010, Robbie Hummel, Etuan Moore, Chris Kramer, Juwan Johnson. Those guys had a 3-game losing streak, and they were 2-3 in the Big Ten at one point, and then they ended up losing 1 game the rest of the regular season and shared the Big Ten with, I think, Michigan State that year. Doesn't matter. But sometimes really good teams and really good players go through these sort of slumps, and it just takes maybe a game like today. You get a win at Maryland, you feel good about yourself for 5 or 6 days, you go back, and then you play Oregon, and then you gear up for a really, really tough, what is it? That's going to be a final 8-game stretch.
Well, and Grant, you and I talked about on Friday in Boilermaker Lounge that the 2022-23 UConn Huskies, not the year that they played Purdue in the finals, had a 3-game losing streak, lost 5 of 8, and still ended up winning the national championship. So I'm not saying that it's going to be an exact comparison, but this was a get-well game that even if they kind of lose a couple of those games that we're talking about, we can still feel pretty good as long as they're being competitive in those games.
Yeah, and if you look at a Big Ten championship through that lens, like 3 of the 4 teams that are ahead of you, Purdue still gets to play. Like if they could find ways to win those games, that's a huge way to help make up that difference. And then you just need a little bit more help, and you're right in the conversation. So all of that stuff is still in play. Obviously, it makes it a lot harder, at least for a Big Ten championship situation, because those losses are going to stick to your record now, and you've got to find a way to come back from them. But ultimately, I think what's more important is that they figure things out by the time they get to that postseason, and it's just, yeah, you're going to have to really pick it up the second half of the season to contend for some of that stuff. But ultimately, this team still has a pretty high ceiling.
Last year, Michigan State, I think it was in early January, lost 3 of 4,
Yes.
won the Big Ten, and made it to the Elite 8. This is not new territory. Like, teams go through this slump. I think because the Big Ten is loaded with Nebraska, Illinois, Michigan, and Michigan State, people look at this 3-game streak like, oh boy, can't win the Big Ten now. I wouldn't rule it out. I still think this team is capable of – Michigan's going to be a problem. Like, Nebraska's going to be a problem. Like, all those teams that we've mentioned are going to be problems. I still think Purdue's good enough to win all those games. I'm not saying they will. I'm just saying I still think there's going to be a point where Michigan goes through 2 or 3 games where they struggle. Probably going to be some for everybody. And so if Purdue can just hold its own, it's going to put himself in good position. So I don't know. I'm interested. I think today was a little bit of a huge sigh of relief out of West Lafayette. Now you get 6 days to kind of recoup, get your energy back right, and go play Oregon here next weekend. And then again, like I said, that final 8 games, you play 4 of the top teams in the Big Ten. So it's good. And then Wisconsin's playing really well too. So you got 5 really tough opponents coming up, and there are no easy games in the Big Ten.
And don't forget, you got to go to Ohio State. And I'm not saying that Ohio State's great, but when you have to travel to Ohio State, they can come out and bite you. Now, if you get, their team talking smack about you before you come in to play them, you might get some some billboard material. I'm not sure if you guys saw Colin White talked about Michigan before the day before they played Michigan. kind of difficult for you to give them bulletin board material and then expect not some retaliation in how they perform. But my point being is Ohio State's not the easiest of places to play if they're playing relatively decent, and you've got to go to Northwestern too.
Yeah. Well, and to your point, Sam, Jake Diebler 2-0 against Matt Painter.
Exactly.
Ended their 7-game losing, 7 or 8 game winning streak last year. And 2 years ago, Purdue, I don't know if they were number 1 or number 2 at that point, but went in, had been on a long winning streak. Number 2, went on a long winning streak and snapped that. So it was Jake
Diebler's first game as a coach.
Yeah. That's so Jake Diebler is the Purdue killer right now.
Yeah. So it's definitely the rest of the season. Now, had Purdue come in here, squeaked a 5-point win, and looked bad, I think this would have been a completely different conversation we're having today, because then we'd be like, okay, there are some serious issues. What is going on with these guys? But at the same time, having been around this team enough, Grant, and us actually, seeing how they can work through some things and how they've lost some of these games, they haven't looked bad. So we were pretty confident this was going to be a good game.
Yeah, I pretty much expected this. You look at the lineups too, like Purdue just matched up so well. Like a lot of where Maryland was weak was where Purdue was strong. And while I thought Maryland had some pretty good individual performances from guys like Mills and Solomon Washington and Darius Adams, like some of those guys played good games, but like they were having to create so much just to get anything. Like there was nothing easy for Maryland, and so points to Purdue executing well defensively, but also just a little bit lack of star power for Maryland.
Well, and Maryland's two big guys, Coit and Saunders, combined for 8 total points.
Yeah.
Saunders with a big goose egg.
Saunders could have been a huge problem, and he was absolutely a non-factor. So,
well, when you're fouling out with like 10.5 minutes left in the game,
exactly.
You knew that, Buzz Williams was like, you've got to stay in there. We need what you could give us, and, it just didn't work out for him in this game. But, well, gentlemen, a 93-63 win over I said last place in one of my tweets. They're next to last. They're 1-9. Penn State's 0-10. So they're not last place, but not a very good Maryland Terrapin team. But it's still it's one of those that it's still difficult to go to College Park on the East Coast and try to win a game there. And Purdue did it in glowing fashion. And now next up, like we said, 6 days off, and then they host Maryland or Oregon. Jeez Louise, it has been a long week, Dustin. They
set the tone early.
They host Oregon in a game on Saturday afternoon. 18-4 after 22 games. 18-4. If you were to tell me Purdue's 18-4 after 22 games, I'd say, okay, we've had some slip ups, but this has still been a very successful season up to this point.
Yeah. Anytime, like the expectation is to win a national championship. So I get why people would be like, we should be 20-2 or, whatever the case is, but 18-4, 22-0, you put yourself in a good position. You got to win some big games because you still want to get a high seed. I don't know that they're in play for a 1 seed. They probably have to win out. But
they win out. I wouldn't doubt that they're a 1 seed.
That's fair enough. But anyway, you
can't be 36-4 and not go undefeated the rest of the way, Dustin.
That's a good point. You heard it from Sam first. He's now predicted 40-0, 39-1, 38-2, 37-3, and now 36-4.
That's right. 36-4. No, it's I love being that, because you know what? One of these times I'm going to be right.
That's right. That is true. That is true. You will be correct at some point.
But anyways, good performance by the Boilermakers today, and we appreciate everybody joining us for BoilerBall postgame in the lounge. For Dustin Schutte and the All-American Grant Flora, I'm Sam Sprunger. We will see you next time.